Good morning. My name is Eva Bosch. I am a painter. Back here you can see a piece I'm working on at the moment. I'm a Catalan. But I have lived in London for 50 years. Today I record this video because last summer I went to the site of Atapuerca in Burgos, and it impressed me considerably. As a result of this visit, and also others that I have made to sites in Turkey, here, in France and in other places in the world, I have been cooking, let's call it that, since we painters do a kind of cooking, do we not? Ideas and thoughts about the pieces made many millennia ago, and which, at least until now, have been considered something else. It is supposed that modern art has different concepts. We don't know what our ancestors thought, but after seeing all these pieces I have formed a certain opinion that I would like to share here with you in this video. What you will see is a chronicle of this trip to Atapuerca, but you will also hear a series of opinions that I have collected and developed over the years and that seem to fit. I will focus on some pieces that are in the Museum of Human Evolution in Burgos. They are 8 small figurines that are between 6 and maybe 13 centimeters. There is only one that is a little higher because it is a relief and is, let's say, the size of the bedrock. And then there is also a figurine of a man who must be about 30 centimeters high with a lion's head. A tablet found in South Africa the size of a hand with a quadruped, and a small piece of ochre about 5 centimeters long with marks. I will talk about these pieces. All the images you will see are taken either from the internet or from books, so I thank all the people who made them. Since this video has no commercial purpose, it is purely for my satisfaction, and I trust maybe yours too, I don't think there is any problem. In the video, as I said, I will explain my reading of these small pieces, and I will also comment on the lecture given by José María Bermúdez explaining how human intelligence works. Obviously, I have only selected a small fragment, but I have also included it in the video. You will hear Juan Luis Arzuaga talking about the planet as a great machine, and Juan José Millás, who adds his artist's commentary. A small fragment of the interview I did to Eudald Carbonell when I went to Atapuerca is also here. And now, without further ado, as the English say, let's begin. As I've said, last summer I visited the excavations at Atapuerca in Burgos, where remains of hominids dating from almost 1.5 million years ago have been found. The site has yielded evidence of continuous human activity right up to the medieval period. The excavation is led by 3 men who have dedicated their entire life to the study of this site. During my visit, I was able to speak to one of them, Eudald Carbonell, a Catalan archaeologist born in Ribes de Freser, whose innovative ideas resulted from many years of meticulous study of the Atapuerca finds. Eudald remembers a conference in Morella in 1976, during which Emiliano Aguirre and Trinidad Torres brought a fossil inside a shoebox. Professor Emiliano Aguirre came with Trinidad Torres and they brought a fossil inside a box of biscuits or shoes, I don't remember, which they said was the oldest fossil ever found in Spain. Indeed, it was the 81 jaw of Atapuerca. I said, "Oh, I would really like to excavate there." And Professor Emiliano Aguirre said, "I need young archaeologists. If I do a project with the ministry, I will call you." He sent me a telegram, and since 1978 I have been in Atapuerca. It will now be 44 years. The fossil was the famous chinless jaw from nearly 500,000 years ago. I'm not surprised that this discovery had such a strong impact in the young Eudald. Watching YouTube videos of the other two archaeologists of the site, Juan Luis Arzuaga and José María Bermúdez, I see that they also went through similar experiences. Curiosity is as strong a drug as an alkaloid. They, as scientists, and I, as an artist, even though we are almost 70 years old, have kept the spirit intact and still desire to know more and more, each of us, in our respective disciplines. Taking advantage of the adrenaline rush that Atapuerca offers, I would like to re-examine the replicas of 11 prehistoric artifacts found and kept around the world that are exhibited at the Museum of Human Evolution in Burgos. These are 8 figurines of small women, a man with a lion's head, a tablet with a drawn quadruped, and a small block of ochre with markings. Eudald also mentioned the 370,000-year-old engravings from Weizinsleben in central Germany. Although the Burgos Museum does not possess replicas of these as yet, you can see them here on the screen as a reference. I think the sensitivity of the strokes carved on the old bone from Weizinsleben and those of the ochre from the Blimbos cave, which we will look at later, are remarkable. In this video, I would like to show that the need for artistic expression is as old as humankind and has not changed in any way over time. Perhaps you do not need to know why Giotto, Rembrandt or Picasso painted, or why Donatello made sculptures, or Beethoven and Bach composed melodic sounds. Nor do we need to know, after the invention of writing, why the Epic of Gilgamesh was written, why Shakespeare and Cervantes wrote, or why Juanjo Millás has a powerful urge to explain things to us. It has always been so, it is still so, and it will always be so. More than why, we should try to understand how artistic expressions are made, what they tell us, and what can we learn from them. The history of modern art follows a linear chronology implemented by historians that give art a structure. Allegedly, over the years, art is increasingly profound, expressing human existence. Picasso arrived at Cubism following in the footsteps of Cézanne, Courbet or Poussin, amongst others. It is not a progression, but an expansion. Let us look at this sculpture of Mary Magdalene, made by Florentine Donatello in 1453. It was probably commissioned by a religious institution. The Magdalene represents the penitent whore, driven into penance and suffering. Many will agree that this sculpture made of wood is much more modern than the Magdalene made in 1793 by the northern Italian Canova in marble. Both are pieces of great artistic value, but if we want to put them in the chronology of art historians, I think that Donatello is closer to Picasso than Canova. Having said that, if we look at the piece found in Hohlefels in Germany, and made almost 40,000 years ago, I honestly think it is the most direct and poignant of all. Thanks to technology, science has advanced at an extraordinary speed, and the dialogue between disciplines is increasingly fluid. Let us now listen to Juan Luis Arzuaga stressing the importance of removing the word why when studying human evolution and the functioning of the planet. The great discovery of science since the scientific revolution of the Baroque era is that the universe, the world, is a machine. The movements of the celestial bodies, for example, follow a law exactly like a clock, exactly like an automaton. Juanjo Millás says, but there is no watchmaker. And Arzuaga replies, well, of course, then there is the problem of the watchmaker. But in any case, everything is predictable. That is, you can study, you can know how the universe works because it is a great machine. It is mechanistic. Interviewer. But it doesn't happen for a purpose. It just happens. No. It is a great machine, isn't it? That is what Newton says. Two bodies attract each other with a force that is equal to the gravitational constant multiplied by the product of the masses and divided by the square of the distance. By the square, not by the cube, not by 2.1, but by the square. And then you could ask Newton, why do two bodies attract each other with a force that is equal to the gravitational constant multiplied? He would say that the question makes no sense. I mean, I experience the world which I try to explain, understand and predict, and it turns out that the world is a gigantic machine. The same applies to living beings. When you begin to understand the function, the programs, the algorithms, for example, of development programs, the scientist doesn't ask himself, why does the world work and why the stars? I don't know, things just evolve in one way or another. The scientist simply tries to understand the laws that govern the universe, the laws. The function of science is this. Now consider the case of the volcano that erupted recently, right? Here there are no whys. That volcano is not there for anything. It does not emit lava for any reason at all. There is simply a bag of magma which has to come out by purely physical and chemical laws and ends up finding a way to come out. But no, there is no purpose in the world of geology, nor in the world of physics, nor in the world of chemistry. In the world of biology, there is an apparent purpose, apparent because there are functions. Biological structures have functions. One could say that the lungs are used to breathe, right? Well, there seems to be functions, but it is still a machine. Descartes was the first to realize that the body was a machine. It was a biomechanical machine. We function like a puppet. We function like an automaton, like the automata of medieval clocks. We could say that just as the Canarian volcano erupts following a process clearly understood by scientists, an art object emerges following the laws of the artistic process mentioned by Ken Keefe. If the artist knows how to put each and every element of this process, which is different every time it is used, with mathematical precision, then the object, painting, sculpture, piece of music, poem, etc., come to life. So let's take a look at the selection of small works of art made thousands and thousands of years ago, of which there are replicas in the Museum of Human Evolution in Burgos, to see if we can also erase the word why they were made, and we concentrate on the pieces themselves and their artistic value. Juan José Millás has mentioned the anonymous watchmaker of the gear or machine referred to by Arzuaga. Perhaps art, and not the piece, is this watchmaker that Millás mentions and that Arzuaga does not deny. Let's start with the Berghad Ram Venus. This is an anthropomorphic figure, barely 3.5 centimeters tall, made of reddish volcanic rock, which was partially shaped naturally by erosion and partially carved by human hands. It was found in 1988 in Masada, at the foot of the Mount Hermon, in a region close to the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights between Israel, Lebanon, Jordan and Syria. It has been dated to be between 250,000 and 280,000 years old, and is just 3.5 centimeters tall. For me, this artifact brings the following questions. Why is it so petite? For ease of transport, perhaps? Why is it made of volcanic rock when it could have been made of wood which weighs much less? Clearly, because it is so small, weight was not a concern. Made of rock, it would last longer, and time would not erase it from history. According to Oudald, Our ancestors could speak and listen just like us. A brain from 500,000 years ago was very similar to our own. Its volume was 1200 cubic centimeters. If we strip ourselves of the technology that we have today, I think we are quite similar to prehistoric humans. They had language and lived in organized societies. They had compassion. They had very similar ways of seeing the world. And the language they spoke would certainly not be difficult to learn now. If a modern child grew up with them, the child will undoubtedly acquire the language. What makes us very different now is how we relate socially through technology. What about artistic judgment? That is already in evidence 300,000 or 400,000 years ago. Remember the Venus of Erechadram, the Tantan Venus, and the engravings in Weitzinsleben? 400,000 years ago, art had already begun. Perhaps this figurine had a special meaning. Was it a symbol? Did it relate to a concept beyond the human realm? Archaeologists called her Venus, but since she has neither a vulva, no breast, not a penis, we could say that she is a sexless being, perhaps simply a human being. 250,000 years ago, hominids probably already knew how easy it was for any species to disappear. If there was language, there would have been oral information passed from mother to child. According to Bermudez, the third archaeologist of the Atapuerca triangle of experts, intelligence has nothing to do with the size of the brain, but with the speed of processing information. In general, it has always been assumed that intelligence is associated with the relative size of the brain, which is called the degree of encephalization, and with certain parts of the brain called the neocortex. But intelligence is linked more to complexity, the number of neurons we have, and the speed with which we process information. We can process information very slowly or very quickly. If we do so very quickly, then the brain is more capable. This is very important. The speed of the brain is increased in the following way. There is a substance called myelin, which is made up of lipids and proteins, phospholipids that form a series of cells in the body. Some are found in the peripheral nervous system and others in the brain. They contribute to the speed of information transmission. These cells form what is called the myelin sheath that protects the long fibers of the neurons, known as cylinder axes. They protect the neurons and multiply the speed of information by up to 100 times. If all neurons are all myelinated with a protective myelin sheath, the speed with which we respond to a stimulus, any stimulus, will be 100 times faster.
Vamos a responder, por ejemplo, ante un estímulo, el que sea, ¿no? Pues va a ser 100 veces más rápido.
250,000 years ago, it would be this mental and physical agility that would save your life when dodging or defeating an animal much bigger and stronger than you. Chiseling a piece of volcanic rock and giving it a shape similar to oneself is an aesthetic celebration of the shape of the human being. Now let's look at the Tantan Venus figurine. This was discovered by a German archaeologist during an archaeological survey at a depth of 15 meters in a fluvial terrace deposit on the north bank of the Draa River, a few kilometers south of the Moroccan city of Tantan, north of Tarfaya. Because it was found in an archaeological excavation, we know that the figurine is made of moderately metamorphosed quartzite. It is 5.82 centimeters long 2.64 centimeters wide and 1.20 centimeters thick, and weighs approximately 10 grams. The piece preserves remnants of hematites. Hematites are grey or reddish crystals. The red of the crystals stains the skin if touched.
O sigui que deixa color en les mans de qui agafa la peça.
The figurine is supposed to be between 400,000 and 200,000 years old, and together with the Venus of Verekhadram are the earliest representations of the human form that have been found anywhere in the world to date. According to experts, the piece is the result of random natural processes. However, the grooves at approximately right angles to the ground plane, which appear on both sides of the object, emphasizing its anthropomorphic character, are partly natural and partly made by the human hand. Some of these grooves are attributable to slight variations in quartzite petrology, grain orientation. Some were formed by connecting natural depressions, and some were formed by percussion alone. You can see the incisions mark A to H in the photos. If the piece has really been chiseled by a human being, like the Ram Lake figurine, they seem to be trying to reproduce the human form but without any gender, opening the door to many interpretations. I have to say that the landscapes surrounding the sites where these artifacts were found are truly extraordinary. I am not surprised that there was a deep need to express feelings through art. Here we have a drawing of a quadruped on a stone slab found in Guachana's cave in Namibia. It dates from about 25,500 to 25,300 years ago. The spectacular cave is in the Ikaras region of southwestern Namibia, about 250,000 kilometers southwest of Ketmanshoop. An animal was drawn in charcoal on a stone slab the size of a hand. The stone was eventually buried in the cave floor by layers of sediment and debris, until in 1969 when a German team excavated the rock shelter and found the first fragment. You can see it on the image on the left. It was more than 3 years later, as a result of a subsequent excavation, that the Germans discovered the matching fragment on the right of the image. Was it broken deliberately or by accident? It is curious that both pieces have survived time. For me, perhaps the most interesting thing is that the image was made on a slab. It could be transported from one place to another, just like the figurine of Berekhadram or that of Tantan. I think this is very important. The images painted on shelters and caves cannot be taken away, but this slab could be moved from one place to another. My friend Matt Gatten's hypothesis on the use of the camera obscura is also very interesting. This effect occurs when in a dark space there is a small hole in the wall that lets light in. On the wall opposite the hole, an upside-down, colorful, vivid image of the view outside is projected. Here we have an example of this phenomenon. An image of the new palace of Prague Castle projected on a wall of an attic located in front of the palace. The light enters through the hole in a tile of the attic roof. Matt proposes that the images drawn on the slabs could have been made by taking advantage of this phenomenon that has existed since there were caves and the sun. It would be easy to trace an outline of the upside-down animal on the slab as it passed the light hole, especially if it stopped to rest. Thousands of years later, the camera obscura takes advantage of the same method to transfer an image to the support on which the picture will be painted. When humans lived in caves, it can be assumed that there were holes through which light filtered through.
forats accidentals.
What did the people who saw them think?
La gent que els
How
veia?
did they understand
Com
it?
ho entenien?
Did they use it?
Ho feien servir?
I think now is the best time to hear Ken Keefe, a great British painter to whom I owe much of my artistic training, talking about his painting process.
Formació artística.
For copyright reasons, I cannot include the original audio. I will read it to you.
No puc deixar-vos sentir l'original.
I don't normally use the word fantasy, but if you ask about distortion, I would say that I simply follow what I think is a typical thing of 20th century painters to do, which is to, on their canvas or whatever, to start the energies that you use in painting, like color, to start them kind of singing and to make the music. If you have a figure in it, a recognizable image, then that is something that you arrive at, you build up, out of the energies that are natural to painting. So, it is almost like evolution, as if the painting surface was the primeval mad, even though it is probably pure white and forms evolve. So you do not say that the elephant is distorted because it is not a horse. You say, well, it is evolved into an elephant and a horse has evolved into a horse. Very often people are worrying about distortion, and obviously there is a distortion in painting sometimes, but very often they are starting from the other end. They are thinking that you got to put a figure into the painting, so it is got to have 2 arms and 2 legs and 1 head. And the head has to go into the body 6.5 times, and it's got to have certain muscles. It's got to have deltoids and gastrocnemiuses, and all the other muscles. But I don't think that most paintings are like that, or has ever been like that. So, that is the problem with the word distortion, and I think I worry about using the word fantasy in a rather similar way. I know that the word is a bit hard to avoid when you look at the things I do, but it is not a word that I like much. That is fair enough, Ken, but you sound rather as if though you are leaving yourself out of this picture. You speak of the primeval mad, you speak of the images emerging from it, and I think I understand what you mean. But there must be an input from you. Call it imagination, call it feelings, whatever it is you and the mad. Or don't you come into it at all? Yes. I think often when people use the word personal, they are trying to push the painting away somehow. They are trying to say, oh, it is just personal. You could say, of course, that any painting is personal because it is a person that does it. You could also make a distinction between the word personal and the word private. I would hate to be private, in the sense of having some meaning in the pictures which I knew, which other people didn't. That is the last thing I want. I think I am getting back to the thought that I have already expressed in answering your previous questions. There can be a kind of resistance to what has happened in 20th century painting.
Seguim, doncs.
So, let's continue. Ken Keefe tells us that the images come out of the painting process. The canvas is like clay, or rather like Arzuaga's constantly moving machine that creates time and space, from which the artist is invited to produce a piece, be it music, painting, literature, or sculpture. The artist has access to the mechanism, and if he or she is good enough, they produce objects that allow the viewer to enter emotional dimensions greater than him or herself. If the surface of the canvas, as Ken Keefe says, is like primordial clay for the painter, marble for the sculptor, sound for the musician, or words for the poet, we could say that the artist is put into operation like Arzuaga's machine, and the result is the piece that comes out of the process, be it a painting, a symphony, a sculpture, or a poem. Just like the machine described by the scientist, there is no watchmaker. The artist moves in the same dimension, and through many hours of work and some moments of clarity, often without any logic, that help him or her to complete the piece. And now we move on to the male representation. The Lion Man is a sculpture made of mammoth ivory, 31.1 centimeters high. It is currently thought to be 40,000 years old. The sculpture was discovered in pieces in 1931 in the cave of Hohensteinstade in the valley of Lona in the German state of Baden-Württemberg. Here you can see a giant reproduction located near the place where the original was found. Perhaps the piece has been enlarged for commercial purposes, but it is still a great disrespect towards the original, which is only about 30 centimeters high. But let's continue with the story of the piece. The Second World War halted all research on Lion Man, and it was many years later, between 1997 and 1998, that Uta Wolf and Elizabeth Smith gathered together the fragments, restored it, and assessed its antiquity. On the upper left arm of the figure are engraved 7 parallel horizontal marks. What do they mean? In 2010 and 2011, new excavations at the cave entrance unearthed more fragments of the figurine. The Lion Man can be seen in the Ulm Museum in Germany. At first it was thought to be a female with a lion's head, but as they reconstructed it, it became clear that it was a male. The piece gives us an indisputable idea of strength, virility, and beauty. In this case, perhaps the height was decided by the size of the piece of mammoth ivory. The sexual attributes of the statuette are not clear, unlike those of the women we will see later. But the aim seems obvious enough, a celebration of virility and strength. Man admires the beast and would like to acquire its attributes. He needs to be strong in order to hunt, fight and defend his group. It doesn't have a belly or big buttocks. Even the navel is represented with a discreet, non-intrusive hole. The figure consists of muscles and the head of a lion, specifically the cave lion that existed then, which was much bigger than the African lion. It is as if the maker of this sculpture followed the same parameters as the Greeks thousands of years later in their representations of the male figure. This contrasts with the representations of women we will look at later. They are women who have given birth and nursed several children. The body is deformed, the thighs are strong to be able to support a heavy body, the body that has been a container of life. They are women with a clear history of life producers. The Venus of Dolni Vestonici is a good example. It is a terracotta statuette of a female figure dating from between 31,000 and 28,000 years ago. It was found at an archaeological site of the same name south of Brno, in the Czech Republic. It is 11.1 centimeters tall, although part of its lower limbs is missing, and 4.3 centimeters wide. It could be one of the oldest pieces of pottery ever found. There is a fingerprint imprinted on the clay before firing that could belong to a boy or a girl between 7 and 15 years old. It is not known if it was the teenager who made the figurine. Again, in the place where it was found, they have erected a gigantic replica that is a sacrilege to the 11.1 centimeters of the original. Sagging breasts and flabby belly may indicate that the woman has gone through more than one pregnancy. Neither hands nor facial features seem to have been considered important. The power lies in the reproductive elements and opens up many possible interpretations. What is the sculptor trying to express? The power of the female that can give birth? Or is it simply a life-transporting container? It is made of fired clay, long before pots and jugs were made. She has no hands, and her feet, if they were ever there, are now missing. On the face there are only 2 marks that could indicate the eyes, and at the top of the head we find some holes that could be the marks of the supports that held the figure while it was fired. The navel is clearly indicated, and the breasts are huge and saggy. The buttocks and hips are generous. There is no doubt that all these figurines emphasize the function of the female womb and milk-filled breasts, as well as the vulva as an orifice for the semen to enter and the child to exit. This figurine was found in Çatalhöyük, Turkey. It has a seed inside, behind the back. Çatalhöyük dates from 7,500 to 6,400 BAC. Although it is much more modern, it seems that the priorities when sculpting the female figure are the same. I understand that all these figurines celebrate the woman as a container for creating life. But my question is, what else? Is that all? Is it an idealization of motherhood or a description of the reproductive parts? What was life like for a pregnant female and mother at that time? How did they manage to run to a shelter with a pregnancy of 8 or 9 months with a ferocious animal chasing them? How did they get food if the pregnancy was not easy and they could not move much? Was it other pregnant females protecting them, or was it the males? What a powerful force led them one after another to become pregnant and suffer the whole process of gestation, childbirth, and even harder later, having to feed and protect the children once the mother's milk ran out. If on top of that they were subject to man, then the question is even more relevant. The beauty of the young body of the lion-headed man is a far cry from the dropping breasts, beaten nipples, swaying on a stretchy swollen belly, and a pussy deformed by the torn vulvas of the born babies. What was the concept of aesthetics? How did the seduction work? So far, only figurines of women's bodies have been found, who have given birth constantly. There are no figurines of teenagers with pointed breasts, flat bellies, round bottoms, and narrow waists. The male's desire for power and competition are well documented and seem to have been the primary reason for the continuation of the species. The lion man is an example. He is young, strong, muscular, and erected with great dignity. Undoubtedly, these 5 bodies that we have here represent the curves of the body of the female that has given birth several times. The saggy bottoms tell us that none of them are teenagers. The head of the Holofels figurine is like a chickpea. It doesn't seem to have any relevance. The figurines of Lucelle and Willendorf have hair, and the one of Lespouge seems to have some stripes that also represent hair, but the one of Dolny-Vestonisi has no sign of it. On the other hand, only she has 2 incisions that could represent eyes. Lucelle's left hand rests on her belly, perhaps indicating that the fetus is growing there, while in the other she carries a cornucopia or horn that could have several uses. Produce sound to alert others, to be a symbol of strength and power, a container of fluid, or does it perhaps represent the same key to art hidden in the rounded tip of the cone pointing to the sky of the rhinoceros horn that Salvador Dali says made him fall to his knees to the ground to praise God who had let him discover it? The artist reproduced what was important. It has always been this way. And in the reading of these pieces lie the answer to many questions.
I en la lectura d'aquestes peces rauen les respostes a moltes preguntes.
The Venus of Lucelle is another example. It was found in 1911. It is a limestone bas-relief of a naked female figure, 46 centimeters high, painted with red ochre. The relief was carved into a large block of limestone that fell from the wall of a rock shelter in the Avry de Lucelle in the commune of Marquier in the Dordogne, southwest France. It dates from 25,000 years ago. It can currently be seen at the Aquitaine Museum in Bordeaux, France. The figure holds in one hand a bison horn or a cornucopia, which has 13 notches. Remember that the lion man has 7 horizontal marks on its left arm. What do the numbers 13 and 7 mean? Like the Ulm lion, perhaps the height was determined by the size of the limestone block on which the relief was carved. It represents a female with her face turned to the right, but without any kind of features. Like the previous figure we have looked at, she has sagging breasts, very wide hips, a noticeable navel and a marked vulva. The left arm rests on a voluptuous belly, and we can distinguish the well-marked fingers. It still has traces of red, which indicates that it may have been completely covered in this color.
Encara té restes de vermell, la qual cosa indica que potser estava tota coberta d'aquest color.
This piece found in Blombos Cave in South Africa is not a figurine, but a piece of ochre whose importance lies in the cross-hatch pattern scratch on its surface. The marks appear to be 70,000 years old, meaning they are made by humans much earlier than any of the figurines we have seen so far. The ochre came from Blombos Cave near Still Bay, Western Cape, South Africa. The piece measures about 5 centimeters in total. It is difficult to speculate on the meaning of the marks. These marks date between 19 and 27,000 years ago and were found in the Basque country in the cave of La Perra. They seem to be made with a similar stroke. What they mean we do not know, but the delicacy of the stroke is undeniable. Our fifth figurine is the Venus of Lespuge. It is a figurine carved from mammoth ivory about 15 centimeters high. It was found in 1922 in Haute-Garonne, in the gorge of the Save River, just below the village of Lespuge, in a cave called Grotte des Rideaux. Here is a photo of the Save River in all its glory. Let us not forget that this river was also there 24,000 years ago. The piece can currently be seen in the Department of Anthropology at the Musée de l'Homme in Paris. Its dimensions, once reconstructed, are 14.7 centimeters high by 6 centimeters wide by 3.6 centimeters deep. It is thought to be between 26,000 and 24,000 years old. The figure is very damaged, but the large buttocks and a kind of skirt that hangs lower down the body are well preserved. She is the only one of the group wearing clothes. But curiously, the skirt hangs below her voluminous bottom. The skirt is more than an item of clothing. We could say that it is a decorative element. This time there are 10 stripes in the design of the skirt. In the front, it is not very clear if the arms are resting on now broken breasts or if there was a big belly. Interestingly, the head has a slight deliberate tilt to one side, giving it a certain coquetry. But like the others, it has no features, no face. The curves of the entire image are exaggerated and give it an exceptional aesthetic value. The piece could easily be done by a 20th century artist. The Venus of Brazenpois is a fragment of a female ivory statuette and is one of the oldest detailed representations of the human face. Brazenpois is a locality in Gascogne. The piece was carved from mammoth ivory. It measures 3.65 centimeters high, 2.2 centimeters wide, and 1.9 centimeters thick. The piece dates from between 29,000 and 22,000 years ago. According to the experts, its association with a well-known index fossil, the Noailles, provides a more precise date, between 26,000 and 24,000 years old. It is distinctive in terms of the detail with which the face is represented, which is absent or blurred in the figurines of Lucelle, L'Espulge, Willendorf or Dolny-Vestonissi. Here you see a monument built at Brazenpois, the place where the piece was found. Curiously, the small size of the piece, it's not even 4 centimeters tall, has been completely ignored. Just like the 2 other commemorative monuments we have looked at before. In the photo, the reproduction is gigantic, completely destroying the delicacy and intimacy of the original. In the Museum of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, Paris, only a reproduction is exhibited, since the ivory is in poor condition and is very sensitive to changes of temperature and humidity. Many reproductions can be seen around the world, but not all are reliable. The original is just a head. She seems to have hair that falls behind her, perhaps a very elaborate hairstyle. Some marks indicate eyes, nose and a well-defined chin. On the right side of the face we see a small crack. The figurine, it could just be a fragment of a bigger piece. It is also as small as the first ones we have already seen. All of them are easy to carry like an amulet. The Lion Man, on the other hand, would be more difficult to carry. Perhaps it was intended to be placed in a particular place or transported from one cave to another, like the portable shrine with the Holy Family inside, which is still a tradition in my hometown in Catalonia. The altar is kept a few days at home and then taken to the neighbor's house.
De tenir-la uns dies a casa i portar-la a la casa del veí passat el temps.
We continue with the Venus of Hulefet. This female figurine was found in 2008 in an excavation inside one of the Hulefet caves in the valley of the river Aar, in the Swabian Juga, near Schechlinen, Vandenberg, Germany. The sculpture, broken into 6 fragments, is 6 centimeters high, 3.5 centimeters wide, and 3 centimeters deep, with a weight of 33 grams. It is made of ivory from a female mammoth. It shows a lot of detail in the hands and fingers, and is missing the left shoulder and arm. It is thought to be 35,000 years old, and could even be 40,000 years old, according to some researchers. This is the oldest of the group. The head is of little importance compared to the huge breasts and a clearly marked vulva. The arm seemed to embrace the belly, which is the container of life. As we said, there are no feet, and the head is just a small lump. She looks like she's pregnant, her breasts bursting with milk. She is all covered with marks. The vulva is open as if she is about to give birth. It should be noted that the whole body is full of small marks, as if the sculptor wanted to decorate it all. It looks as if it is about to explode, which is rather like what the female goes through when she pushes her baby out of the vulva.
Sembla com si estigués a punt d'explotar, que d'alguna manera és el que fa la femella al moment de fer sortir el seu nadó per la vulva.
The last and best preserved is the Venus of Willendorf. It is a representation of a female figure 11.5 centimeters high, discovered in a site near Willendorf, Austria. Curiously, it is exactly the same size as the Venus of Dolny-Vestonissi. Probably a coincidence, but interesting to note. It is carved in limestone, which is not native to the region, and painted with red ochre. New research by a team in Vienna shows that it is made of oolite, a form of limestone that probably comes from the northern Italy, around Lake Garda, about 700 kilometers away from where the figurine was found. It is clear that there is no oolite in and around Willendorf. The piece is preserved in the Natural History Museum in Vienna. In 1990, after a review of the stratigraphy of the site where it was found, it was estimated to have been carved 29,400 years ago. When it was discovered, it was completely covered in red ochre. She wears a hairstyle that could perhaps be compared to that of the Venus of Brazenpois. Big breasts but not saggy, like those of the other women we have discussed, arms resting on the chest, a position that is very common in prehistoric statuettes. A noticeable belly button, white hips and white buttocks too, but droopy, perhaps to show that the woman is not young. The vulva is carved in great detail, and the legs have knees. On the face there is no hint of any features.
I les cames tenen genolls. A la cara no hi ha cap indici de faccions.
Why our ancestors made these pieces that we have looked at, we do not know, and perhaps it is not important to know. They are works of art made by people who understood the aesthetic values of form. There is little difference when valuing these figurines and any piece made by the Sumerians who lived between the Tigris and Euphrates, or the art found in Persia or Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. On the other hand, many great artists of the 20th century, such as Joan Miró or Picasso, have felt themselves to be part of the same tradition and remarked as such after seeing the paintings on the caves. What is certain is that these pieces have survived time. The creators of these 8 female figurines have concentrated on emphasizing the attributes of the reproductive female body. They show us without a doubt the power of the female's biological parts that can give birth to a living being. Nothing else seems to matter to them. The head, feet or facial features do not seem to have much relevance except for the small ivory head and the ceramic statuette or the tilt of the head of the Lespuche figurine. In addition, they are very small, as if their colossal function and their great artistic value were concentrated in their smallness. Whether they were made by a man or a woman is the big question. Nowadays, it is not very important, but 40,000 years ago it was. Of the images of men in this group represented at the Museum of Human Evolution in Burgos, we only have one. This figurine has a head of a large lion, broad shoulders, and an erect and formal pose which seems to demonstrate his value as a strong and brave male, capable of fending for himself and his clan. To conclude, we have examined 2 small pieces less than 6 centimeters high, found in Morocco and Syria. One made of quartzite with hematites that shine in the light and stain your hand red, and the other also with the red color present in the volcanic rock from which it is sculpted. One was made between 200,000 and 400,000 years ago, and the other between 250,000 and 280,000 years ago. From Morocco and Syria, we go to the center of Germany, where we find 370,000 years old engravings made with the same delicacy of those of the Blombos cave in South Africa, engraved 70,000 years ago on a small piece of ochre less than 5 centimeters long. The cave is 34.5 meters above sea level and about 100 meters from the current coast of the Antarctic Ocean. I'm not surprised that a landscape like this inspired the delicate marks on the small ochre support. From there we go to Namibia, also in South Africa, and inside the cave, 340 kilometers from the sea, we find a tablet the size of a hand broken into 2 pieces with an image of a quadruped drawn very delicately in charcoal about 25,000 years ago. The discovery of agriculture about 12,000 years ago, as well as the domestication of animals, made subsistence economy possible. Human beings now produce their own food. You no longer had to be a nomad, you could be sedentary. We have numerous rock shelters full of hunting images made during this period, where specialized hunting techniques are demonstrated and where the human figure is represented. On the other hand, in the paintings and drawings inside caves, which are much older, the human figure is almost non-existent.
L'ésser humà és gairebé inexistent.
Why did the human being not represent him or herself two-dimensionally? There are palms all over the planet, but not the human figure. Except in very rare cases, and often, the human being is wearing the mask of an animal on his head and covering his or her face. This is not the case in the three-dimensional pieces we have here. They were made while hunting and predatory occupations were the means of survival of our ancestors. You had to move from one place to another, looking for fruit trees, dead animals abandoned by predators, and clean water. You had to run away from fierce animals that were difficult to fight, or perhaps from dangerous neighbors. These objects were probably carried like amulets. We have 8 figurines of females and one of a man with a lion's head. We are talking about 40,000 and 25,000 years ago, when agriculture and domestication were still a dream. The figurines are containers of life that testify that they have given birth many times. They are professionals in childbirth. Their beauty lies in the number of babies they are able to conceive and give birth to. 500,000 years ago, life expectancy was about 30 to 35 years. At the beginning of the Neolithic, that is 12,000 years ago, for example in Ashikli in Turkey, a female body of up to 60 years of age has been found. What was the life expectancy of a female 40,000 years ago? Until what age could she be pregnant? With each pregnancy, there was the possibility of death. So the figurines refer to females that had given birth repeatedly and could still continue to give birth. We could say that the life of a female consisted only of gestating a pregnancy every 9 months or from the lactation period that prevented pregnancy, giving birth to children and taking care of them growing up. There was no other function. On the other hand, the man has a beautiful, attractive and strong body. He is young. He is a warrior who knows how to defend and can impregnate females. He wears the head of a great cave lion as a decorative hat. It must be attractive to be able to fuck and reproduce the species. He too is exposed to death on a daily basis. He is surrounded by ferocious animals much stronger than him. Being alive was the prize every night when they went to sleep. It does not seem that the laws of existence of our past ancestors were very easy. But as scientists say, there is no morality in nature and its processes. If the first 2 figurines we have seen from Morocco and Syria are really sexless human beings, we will have to ask ourselves many questions about it. Thousands of years later, the 5 complete figurines of females and that of a lion man that we have seen express a sexuality of which the artist was aware. Considering that the tools for shaping ivory or volcanic stone were limited, we could say that it took time to complete them. Time between giving birth and caring for children, hunting animals, picking fruit, long stays inside dark caves, and even darker when fire wasn't yet in use, and time to solve social issues between groups. It also took time to decide how to sculpt the piece, starting from a small block that allowed few mistakes. The existential problems of producing a piece by the prehistoric artist were perhaps not very different from ours. Art has always kept us alive. The artist's gaze allows us to enter the unknown. There is no reason why. It is just the way it is.